Hola, first gen. I hope you are hanging in there. I hope you are okay. Let's do this. Welcome to the First Gen Healing Podcast. If this is your first episode, this is a podcast on Latinx healing and awakening journeys. And in these episodes, they're kind of my solo episodes, my in-betweens. Typically, I'm bringing on a guest. We're hearing their story, their areas of expertise. And then in these episodes, it's more a little bit of everything when it comes to healing and awakening. Pero I would be lying if I didn't say that obviously the priorities that this new administration has have been gut-wrenching, and the way that they're going about it is disgusting and it's hurtful. And I feel like I've been in a roller coaster of emotions. I imagine and wonder if you have been too, simply because there are moments where I feel devastated. I think, like, obviously, being a first gen, we are super close to the experience of our parents immigrating here, or potentially like you were part of like you remember immigrating here, and so I know that these are things that we hold close to our hearts, and that potentially you're even experiencing like the fear of what may happen. And so, yeah, sometimes I think, dragged down by all of that, like just putting myself in other people's shoes. And then sometimes I feel empowered, like we got this, we're gonna, like we're not gonna let them get to us. There's gonna be changes in this world. Certain people que están como awoken, no? Piensan que things are gonna change for the better eventually. And those of us that have been going through this journey for a while now potentially even have already grieved all of the caca that is coming to the surface. I remember in 2018-ish, during the dark night of my soul, which is basically like when you start to come into awareness and consciousness of so much. You go down all of these rabbit holes where you look at like the one percenters and you look at life as it is versus how it could be. You start to recognize we're conditioned into like these boxes and we're kind of like suffocated in them. And like you start to really like open all of these doors of awareness and consciousness, and it's really overwhelming. And I remember there was a period where I grieved this whole BS of like having papers or not, and like, being illegal, etc. Como when I got the seed of awareness of we're all citizens of planet Earth and it's BS what they have created out of that. The fact that there is so much suffering that happens because it's a piece of paper is just like so frustrating, that this is reality and that we are still here, that we come back to this over and over and over again, that there's these ideas of scarcity and greed and ego and so much causes so much distress and destruction and separation in families and in our communities. And most recently for me, like I've been running up against the thought or the question, what is the point of it all? And how unfortunate it is, how it all is. So last time I had mentioned that we were evacuated, right? And that thankfully our house is okay. But that felt like a big hit because I think like something that sank really deeply within me is just like some of our parents truly, like, their whole life is working. Some of us, I feel, get the opportunity and the privilege of awakening because of the life experience our parents had. Had they not had that, some of us would still be stuck in full-on survival mode. If you guys have seen like that pyramid, I think it's Maslow's pyramids of needs, algo así, where like because our parents did achieve for us having a home and food, then we got to move on to the next level and then look for purpose or even start to think about that. And that is not an easy journey in and of itself, being a first gen, because it almost feels like we don't deserve that. And that's what I've been working on for so many years, like working on the beliefs that told me I didn't deserve to dream, or that I had to just make safe choices. And then I've been trying to also share that with you guys through my social media, through the podcast, through my community that I host, like empowering people to dig deeper and find a happier and more fulfilling life for themselves. And then it almost feels like everything that is happening just pulls us back into that. And so that was like, this is my mom's house. So that was like my maternal side. And then there's been like health issues happening in my paternal side. And if you guys listen to this past week's episode with Melissa spoke about her journey of healing her cancer, and how illnesses can be tied to emotional distress, to trauma, that kind of stuff. It At the time that we recorded it, felt like such a beautiful kind of like overlay to what has been happening in this podcast. It's evolved little by little to where maybe in the beginning we spoke about the trauma. Then I started to bring in people that spoke about like different ways of thinking or viewing or seeing, perspective shifts, right? And then I felt like this was like a beginning of a new chapter with Melissa, of kind of bringing to the table, tying it all together, why this is all so important, why it's so important to validate your experience and to heal and to pay attention to yourself and to address some of the emotional stuff, because some of our parents have decided to enterrar esas cosas because they didn't have the time or the resources, or they simply wouldn't have eaten or been able to give us what they did give us, if they would have paused and stopped and processed, or at least that's how they viewed it, you know? And and what made me emotional just a second ago is because I think that all of this stuff, unfortunately, también impacts our people in the sense of health. So some of us that are getting a little bit older, we're going to start to see, or already seeing, like, and the after effects of not only the emotional distress and the gaps that are made, right, when we have parents that are working all of the time and don't have like the emotional bandwidth or maturity to connect with us, and what that causes within us, the imposter syndrome, that we feel, the lack of self-love, lack of self-trust. Like, that's been kind of the focus of the podcast, is giving a spotlight to the first gen experience and what we go through. And currently I feel like I've been pulled back into also the empathy towards like our parents' generation and what they go through. And that's not to say that I didn't have empathy prior. I did, but I felt the need to put a focal point on our experiences, because not a lot of our families were willing to do that for us. So like when we start to go to therapy and we start to name the things that we're feeling, and we start to kind of like gain this knowledge, some of our first instincts is like, oh my gosh, I want to share this with my family so that they validate it, and so that we can all learn from that and it can be better. And yet, what typically ends up happening is they reject it, they invalidate us. You don't have anything to complain about. How dare you bring this up? You should just get over it like I did, you know? And so instead of like kind of it being welcome, the doors are shut when we bring it to our family. And so I was like, okay, I want to create spaces and places to open those doors and be like, hey, I know you're coming into this awareness. You're not alone. There's a lot of us out here, and you're valid for feeling and going through what you are, and for wanting to heal it, because it definitely needs some healing. And just lately, I guess I've been pulled back into the after effects of everything, like now that I'm getting a little bit older, and also paying attention, I guess, to what is happening to those around me that are older than me when it comes to their health, when it comes to their limitations, is also como heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because a lot of the times we bet on this future that sometimes doesn't come. And that's so sad. Like to work your whole life to, oh, well, one day I'm going to retire and travel, and like a lot of our family members or the generation of our parents don't actually get to do that, you know, or para relajarme y ya no voy a preocuparme de nada, and they don't make it to those ages, or they do but they have a lot of health issues because of what they've put their body through, because of the ongoing many years of survival mode, of being in fight or flight, of not being able to fully relax, not being able to fully rest, of holding all of this trauma and the tension that they hold in their bodies. And so it just makes me so sad that when they do get to those ages, it doesn't come easily either. And they don't have the financial means to address those things sometimes, or to do it in a way that isn't like stressful or that isn't also hard. And I just had this thought, you know, also like what a privilege to even get to this point, because right now some of you and some of our fellow first gens aren't just like at this point, or they're not even getting to get to this point because families are being ripped apart, because like there's so much uncertainty, right? Of like what's going to happen, what is my future going to look like? And I can't even imagine. That's like a whole other también thing, to be separated by a country, to not know what that's going to look like, what that's going to mean. It's a lot. It's so interesting because like online, obviously I'm a creator, right? A baby one, but I'm still like a social media content creator, and I see a lot of the judgment of like so and so isn't speaking up, or they're not doing enough, or they're. And it's funny because like I feel like I'm such a small creator that no one's like put that responsibility on me, and yet I've been sitting back and just thinking like, what would be the right thing to say, or how could I show up for my people, and what does that even look like? And for one, I decided part of that is to continue to show up. So here I am. And if you're not watching the video version of this, very few people actually do, porque I have it on YouTube and I have been terrible at like sharing video clips and stuff, pero I'm actually wearing cloud glasses with little raindrops, little tears, and a hoodie. Porque I have found it hard. I find it hard personally to show up when I'm in the midst of tormentas of my own and or collectively. I tend to want to go into hermit mode. And the more I've allowed myself to become authentic, the more sensitive I have become. So I tend to like feel really deeply, and this work, putting yourself on camera, having a message to share, speaking your truth is super vulnerable. Those moments where I haven't posted for weeks at a time, the majority of the time things are happening in the world or in my internal world, and I feel like going into my shell. But what I've also recognized is that this isn't going to stop. So, for example, a little bit over a year ago, cuando empezó lo que está pasando en Gaza, pues I pulled back a lot. I felt like, how am I going to talk about my services or what I do or whatever when there's that going on? So I started to post less and less and less. Then certain emergencies happening in my family, también, I would pull back and post less and less and less. And I'm kind of I've recognized for myself, and maybe you'll recognize for you, that that's kind of what I've done in my life, where I keep hitting pause on myself, on my dreams or my things or lo que sea, because I think that I need to hold this role within other people's lives or even collectively, that it's easy for me to put myself back and put other things as priority. And it's like this, such an interesting thing, because obviously this is a lesson or something that I talk to all of the people that I've worked one-on-one with, to prioritize themselves and their needs, and to continuously bet on like their joy and their fulfillment. And yet I guess I'm learning another layer of that, you know, which is like, as let's say a small business owner, entrepreneur, even like a heart-centered person that wants to create hopefully positive impact in the world or in my community, I'm learning that part of the lesson here is that I was forgetting that for myself. I wanted to share that with you because I know a lot of you fellow first gens también, we kind of do this, we think the only way to show up for other people is to fully be there and to cap our own happiness, cap our own joy, cap our how we prioritize ourselves. And the thing is that you might not notice is that you probably do it for multiple people and multiple, like you do it for work and your friends and your family. So you're never going to fully let yourself be and bet on yourself and kind of go for the things that you need if you think that every time something happens to those around you, you have to put yourself on pause. And it's not that you're not supposed to be there for others, but I think the lesson I've learned and I want to share is you can be there for them without fully drowning with them. You can be of service, you can be helpful as a friend, as a family member without fully needing to be where they're at, if that makes sense. And that's been a lesson that I'm thankful that I'm learning porque I would say the first 30 years of my life, that's the only way I knew how to show up. It's like, oh, you're going through it. Oh, you're not feeling happy. Oh, you're grieving. Like, let me put myself in your shoes and fully meet you where you're at because that's the only way I know how to support you. But now I've done that enough times where I'm like, I'm tired of drowning, even in my own stuff. I don't want to continue to like fully pull back and fully let it drown me and stop me. And porque tampoco that doesn't also feel good, honestly, at least not for me anymore. And so I'm finding ways to like reset faster and faster and come back to center, as some people call it. Coming back to myself, coming back to hope, coming back to like regenerating energy and empowerment within me. I call it your inner poder, right? So coming back to my inner poder, recentering, grounding again, and then getting back up and showing up. I tend to attract fellow first gens que son como yo, que we used to push through everything. We hold a lot of masculine energy. We are go-go-goes. And so now, like, I had to grieve that I'm letting go of that version of me. And I've also had to find new tools and new ways of how do I continue to show up if I don't want to be rough on myself, if I want to honor my emotional state, my mental state, my health. And this is one way of it. It's like, how do I still show up and be vulnerable if I'm not feeling like being vulnerable? One way I found is like, what makes you feel safe? So right now I'm wearing these black cloud glasses with my hoodie, and that helps me feel protected and safe. And so I invite you to maybe think about, is that something that you tend to do? Is it maybe easier for you to set everything down and say, oh, so-and-so is going through something. Now I get to focus a lot of my energy on that. And I, once again, put pause on myself. And if so, is that something that you want to continue to do? Or can you dare to explore what does it look like to show up for that person and still save some energy and for myself and continue to press play on where the road that I was headed on? And I don't know, I think that would be interesting for you guys to like ponder on if that's not something that you're already, like you've already worked on, porque definitivamente I think I saw it so clearly in others and I thought I had kind of cleared that within me, but I started to see like, now I'm doing it with my business. Now I'm doing it with the way I show up online, And so through everything that I've been seeing online, definitely my first instinct was like, let me just hide. Let me not take up space. Let me go into my cocoon and like just, no sé, think about this, process it. And then I thought, no, that's actually what we're working on, which is like, let's continue, let's show up. And so that's what I'm doing here. And I hope that it's serving in one way or another. Speaking about serving, I made a change recently that I am actually really excited about, which is that I reduced my prices significantly for my one-to-ones and for my 3-month mentorship. And the reason being is when I was talking to a friend, I told her I want to remain like accessible. And then what I recognize is that just because chaotic things are happening doesn't mean the journey you're going through within stops. And it doesn't mean that stuff stops happening. Like sometimes I remember when chaotic stuff would happen in my personal life, I thought, oh, well, maybe finally this means that we will all understand that all of the small arguments are BS and that we should just love each other, like be there for each other. Y como que no pasaba that fully that way, you know, todavía the judgment would continue to show up, and just like these dynamics within family would continue to show up regardless of the times that we're going through. So similarly, I imagine like some of you are still going through your process of wanting to find your authentic self. In fact, it might be it I feel it's super important during these times, you know, to find your truth, find your voice, know how to use it, feel confident doing so, having that self-trust. Like the need for all of that is not going away. So I understood that and I decided to, I think it's more than half my prices. So if you maybe had thought of working with me one to one, but you felt it wasn't accessible to you, like now it will be, I hope. And I'm definitely like ready to serve and ready to show up for you, for your process, what you're navigating. I think like, well, I won't get too into it, but you know, one of the things that happens is that when we are those people pleasers, when we are those go-tos in our families, that's our identity. So what is what we feel in the inside is reflected on the outside. And so if that's how we feel within, that that's what's most important, that that's what makes us us, then in the outer world, that's what we're going to see reflected back. But once you start to work on your mindset and you start to work on some of those beliefs and some of those patterns, you start to see that there is actually ways to make room for yourself in your own life, to make yourself a priority, y ese tipo de cosas. And so that's kind of what I work on with people one to one, as well as learning to listen to your intuition and creating a life that aligns with who you are and what you want. And it may feel like, okay, there's so many uncertain things, but I can almost bet that your intuition is still talking to you, that there are still changes that despite the uncertainty, despite the craziness, your intuition is inviting you to do certain things, head in a certain direction. And so if you're like needing help with identifying like what's blocking me from finally listening or taking action or like even hearing my intuition, pues eso también is part of what I do in one-to-ones and in my 3-month mentorship program. So I'm going to leave those linked in the description, of course, if that is something that you want to do. But I did want to just share that overall with you guys because it was important for me to say that and for me to make that shift. I think like as you become this entrepreneur, right? Like you can get in your head about como the ego part. Oh no, I know I'm worth more. I know this and that. And the thing is like I know the worth of my work and I have even been told that I should increase my prices, you know? But that's not where we're at right now. That's not what my people need right now, you know? And so that is not what I'm going to focus on. So I hope that this is part of like me showing that authentic part of me and also like maybe demonstrating part of what I feel like is going to be needed during these times. It's like ego down, ego by, like set it to the side. And don't be ashamed to make the changes that you need. Don't be ashamed to say sorry or say or be vulnerable or be authentic, right? This is like maybe not the ideal way that I would want to show up in this hoodie and these glasses, but this is the way that I can show up right now. And this is me kind of like walking my walk because the point of my journey has been I want to be authentic. I don't want to people please. I don't want to be someone that I'm not. I don't want to show up in a way that I can't. And this is my version of that, you know, and I will continue to hopefully model that for you guys in the best way that I can. And I think like overall, there's just different ways where I model that. For example, on social media, it's becoming trendy to call out Latinos for not posting about what is going on and like spewing hate their way and let's cancel them. And yeah, let's cancel them. And guys, I hope that those of you listening understand that that's not productive. That you know, I heard this video the other day. Like, it's crazy that these billionaires have convinced us that people making less than minimum wage are the problem and are the ones taking away opportunities from us when these billionaires are billionaires. And it's like exactly lo mismo está pasando, I think, in our communities. Like we need to remain centered, grounded in like what's reality, what's not, what's productive, what's not. And I don't think it's productive to andar tumbándonos amongst each other when that's already happening. I don't think that that's productive. I think what is productive is us, each other, focusing like, how can we be a part of this? What role can I play? What's within my means? I do think like that blaming and like, yeah, that's like comes also from a place of feeling powerless, right? Like, I don't feel powerful enough to make a change, so I want you to do it. I want you to use your voice because I don't feel comfortable enough to use my voice. So I think part of it is like, tapping into that. Okay, why do I feel powerless? Why do I feel like I need someone else to speak for me or speak to me and say the right things? No, we have to remain vigilant. Like, qué fácil va a ser for them to continue to impact our communities if we're not united, si nos atacamos entre nosotros. Even, for example, the saying of like, ay, tienes el nopal en la frente. That's us being racist amongst each other. We don't need that. I think we don't need that. I think we need to find ways to be more united. Like, why are we creating mosh pits when what we need to do is link arms and like walk forward together? But instead, we're kind of like, no, you're not, like we're kind of fighting amongst each other. And I don't think that's productive. I guess that's my truth. I'm like, my throat feels really dry. But yeah, that's part of what I've been observing. And I also wanted to mention, it kind of aligned with that, but different. There's going to be people who think everyone should be doing what they're doing. And this goes so aligned with, as you become like more of an observer, you become more present, you start to recognize this. Some stuff is an illusion. So, like, some people might be like, oh, you guys aren't doing enough, or you're not doing it the right way because we should be doing it this way. But some people aren't thinking of sustainability. They're not thinking long term. They're not thinking. So, like, muchas veces en leadership, lo que pasa es como cosas como cohetes. They burn really bright and really fast, and they kind of call your attention, but then they burn out just as fast. And so I think it's important to be mindful of that as we continue, because unfortunately, this isn't like gonna just disappear. It's not just gonna go away from one day to another. So I think we have to be pues muy como grounded and vigilant, into who we listen to, what we listen to, what we allow in our system, what are we cultivating within our system. So I imagine, for example, I've been doom scrolling. What I've been cooking in my system is a lot of nervousness and a lot of like chest. Like, if I were to tune into my body, I love to show people how to tune into their body. So if I were to tune into my body when I doom scroll, lo que pasa is I'm cooking in my stomach, I'm cooking ugly butterflies, and in my chest, I'm cooking like weight, and that's what keeps building and building and building as I doom scroll. So it's going to be important for you to notice, like, what are you allowing to grow within you, and how can you alchemize it? How can you shift it? Because going back to what made me, what I was talking about earlier about like the impact of the trauma and everything in our parents' generation, the same thing will be for us. What are we letting in our system? And potentially that is going to alchemize negatively. I have had people around me get so stressed that they end up like getting sick. I do that too sometimes. I overthink to the point where I get sick, or nauseous or stuff like that, So be mindful of like, what are you allowing in your system? What are you growing within? And can you seed different things that will also help you? So, for example, if you're going to allow nervousness and anxiety to grow within you, can you also allow hope and belief to grow within you? And like, and maybe be mindful of like, am I putting enough energy towards half and half? No todo a un lado, porque eso tampoco nos va a ayudar. Just feeling stressed out, just feeling nervous, and it's just going to burn you out faster. And we don't want that or need that. So I hope that that made sense, and I hope that that helps, because definitely I'm also speaking to myself. But I do think that that's going to be important, like being mindful of how we take care of ourselves, of our bodies, of our mental, physical, emotional health. It's all important always, right? But I think even more so in these moments. Okay, so to kind of ground everything that we've been talking through and tie it together to the idea of, or a reflection of, there's an illusion of control, I wanted to share a personal reflection, which is that when we start to recognize that we are healing and we are desiring to become more authentic, there's a big need to release the need to control others' perception of us. And that's tied hand in hand with authenticity también. So if you want to become more authentic and more yourself, there's a huge piece of it, a chunk of it, that typically is what I work through with people, which is like, you have to be willing to let go of having control over how people perceive you. Because a lot of the time, who I'm working with, it's like I want to be perceived as good or responsible or dependable, loyal. There's a need to be perceived in a certain way, easygoing, not problematic, capable. And so that is what keeps us tied to the version of us that we created. And that's what makes it really hard to start to even listen to your intuition, porque you are more loyal to wanting to keep a certain image of who you are and what you do alive than you are loyal to your intuition, to the things that your soul is asking you to do, to like you're kind of like so used to not being loyal to that part of you. Because how can you love yourself when who you are, it wasn't made for you, it was made for others' perception? So when you start to make that shift of like, actually, I don't care what you perceive of me, I care more about how I feel today, tomorrow, in this conversation, and you start to prioritize that, there's a big part of you that has to let go of the need for control, of controlling others' perception of you, of controlling who you think you are, of controlling the type of sister you think you are, the type of worker you think you are. Like, you start to let go of that and you recognize that that was an illusion to begin with. But it's really hard. It does require even like grieving, because you're so used to being that and having that illusion of that control. And oftentimes when you start healing and awakening, then you want to shift that control to your parents and your family members and your friends. Like, oh, look, I learned healing tools and I want your life to be better because I feel like mine is getting better. So let me try to like influence you to then change in blank, blank, blank ways. Again, trying to control, shifting the control from others' perception to now others' lives. And then we get into these journeys and we learn these tools. You actually start to co-create with the universe. You start to see that there is this shift that you can create and you can kind of like spearhead, And so it's a beautiful journey. This is where you see people blossom. It's like, because you start to invest your time and energy into things that actually interest you. You start to use your voice. You start to break through limiting beliefs and reprogram your subconscious mind. And it's like this beautiful thing where you start to really shift your reality. But the reflection is that even with all of that, even when you become a co-creator of your life, I think, at least for me, I recognized that that too was giving me the illusion of control. And that at the end of the day, that initial powerlessness that I felt when I was first going through my healing and awakening journey, when you kind of feel like you're becoming ashes, where everything around you is burning down and you don't even have time to grasp it enough to keep it the same for a little bit, like, no, things are just constantly changing. I think that in those moments, there was a deep, deep surrender, a surrender to like, okay, fine. I've perceived life differently than it actually is. I haven't had as much control as I thought I did. Even though I was independent, I was very enmeshed in my family. Even though I've always gone after goals and achieve them, they were never actually my goals. I don't even know what my goals are, right? So there's this surrender that happens to the universe or to your journey or to yourself, whatever you feel comfortable like calling it. And yet then you start to try to get control again. At least for me, and I feel like some of you are really going to resonate with this. It's like then suddenly you start to kind of learn all these tools and all these things of like, how do I cope with surrender? And what you may not be realizing is that you're also trying to gain back the illusion of control. And so now I've made this like huge, they say like our journeys are like upward spirals. So I feel like I'm coming right back around to this spiral and recognizing like, oh, I also kind of felt like maybe I had control, and that made me feel good. And life has been kind of blowing up in my face again these last couple of weeks and months, and it's it's been like, oh my God, what's happening? Am I taking steps backward? Am I doing something wrong? And I think the answer is no. I think the answer is just you don't have as much control as you want, no matter what you do. There still has to be that surrender, because I can't control, like, let's say el incendio que pasó o lo que está pasando ahorita. All of those things we don't have control over. We only literally have control over ourselves. And that can be such a hard thing to grapple with, right? I think sometimes what happens is like we feel it as a shadow, like this realization feels. Let me know if you guys feel that. Like right now, even as I'm tuning in, I feel it like as weight behind me. It's like a shadow telling me like you don't have control. And sometimes what happens to us is like we start to do more and more and more. Like, no, I'm like maybe I need to do more affirmations, or maybe I need to work harder, maybe I need a side hustle, maybe right? And so we're like running faster and faster, faster until like that freaking cloud or shadow comes over us like, whew, and we have to look back and face it. We have to look back. And that's what I've been kind of navigating. It's like looking back and being like, oh yeah, you're still here. Like, oh yeah, I forgot that was the whole point, that it's like to surrender also. Yes, it's to co-create, like, yes, it's to express gratitude, but no matter how much gratitude I express over the things that I love, it doesn't mean that I will always have them. It doesn't mean that they will always be there the way that I want them to be. And that's hard, you guys. That is so hard. And I hope some of you made it to this point. And that it makes sense to you guys, and that like you're hearing me and it's like, clicking, or that maybe you resonate, or maybe you too have been trying to run away from that shadow. Maybe this encourages you to pause a little bit, to not burn out, and to have the courage to kind of look back and like integrate that truth. It's not easy, but sometimes that's what's needed, and that sometimes gives you the peace that you've been searching for, which is so weird. It's so weird even to say out loud because we are trying to find peace and control, and that is an illusion. And that's crazy. And that can be sad sometimes. That's where I'm at in terms of that. And when I tied it all together, I was just like, this is crazy. It's crazy that it really is this upward spiral. You do come back to similar lessons. And maybe that's the magic, right? Of like this whole co-creation universe thing. But it's like, yeah, yes, and it's not full control. As humans, we take a snapshot of where we think we are, what we think we have access to, who we think we are, what we think we can bring to the table, and then we create a vision from that of the future. And when something shifts outside of that, it can be so disorienting. It could be like, wait, what? No, but like I created this thing out of this thing, and so for me, it's like, oh, well, I created First Healing with the assumption that things were only getting better and we're going to become more progressive and like blah, 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 blah. And then boom, pasa esto. And it's like, ooh, okay, wait, no, right? It's like, oh, time to rewrite. But what's beautiful about like finding your authenticity and coming back to that surrender is that there is that piece of like, you will find a way. It's building a relationship with being okay with having to recreate a vision over and over and over again. And it reminds me of on TikTok, I share these things called like mensajitos. And so they're kind of like 10-minute videos. And it reminds me of one where I was saying like in this journey of authenticity, and I feel like right now it's in this journey of life, it's going to be harder and harder for you to look 5 and 10 years out. It's really hard for us to think of what is our future going to look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And it's kind of forcing us to keep the vision short and then rewrite it as we walk, And I was seeing it through the lens of like authenticity. Like when you're becoming your authentic self, you start to recognize all the illusions and bring down so much from who you thought you were and what you thought you did and what I mentioned. And so you're learning about yourself as you go. And so it's actually beneficial to not create this long-term plan, because sometimes that just holds us back from fully becoming our authentic self. Because as we're like trying to peel the layers to get to your inner poder, some people feel really naked, and so they're trying to put layers back on through creating a vision for their future, and then that weighs you down a lot. So then what's helpful in these journeys is to not put on the weight of the future and continue to stay in the uncomfortableness of being in the present. Because the projection that you might project out is going to change tomorrow, because you might learn something new about yourself. You might have such a beautiful conversation, and it's just going to, like, the more you're able to drop the vision, yes, create it if it helps you for the moment, and then drop it, and then drop it, and then drop it, then you're able to live authentically more and more and more. As opposed to what we're used to, which is like, oh, when I was 15, I created this vision for my life and I put so much weight behind it and so much effort and time behind it that now it's impossible for me to pivot. But like the magic in the whole like tower moment and everything is like everything gets kind of like swooshed to the side, and that allows you to rebuild. So anyways, now it's it's coming to the table when it comes to like the uncertainty of the future. Like we're all going to have to continuously make sense of our todays, of our tomorrows, of our next weeks. We might not get the illusion of comfort that we used to get from creating a 10-year vision, a 5-year plan, but that actually might be the baseline, hopefully, of us being able to create a better future. Because what we're seeing here, I think, is also a lot of systems that were created for the long term, to the point that they no longer serve who they were supposed to serve and how they were supposed to serve them. But I think that like that's what's happening to us right now. It's that we're used to the comfort of like the 10-year plan, of the security of and so are these systems. We thought that they were these like, oh, well, they have all the features, they've got our backs, right? They're going to protect our rights, right? They're going to make things better. And the disillusion is like, actually, no. In fact, like they're going to work against you. They're going to take us backwards. And so we're seeing, kind of that play out. And it's making us have to readjust. And I think if we're able to let go of the vision, readjust, I'm hoping that as humanity, that takes us a lot further and creates a lot better change for us than we could do if we just stayed stagnant. But it's so much easier said than done. I think this was perceived by a lot of people that I like, not mentors directly, but people that I used to follow online, or that through the depths of my awakening kind of like walked me through it. I feel like that's what a lot of us have been perceiving as we've been awakening, that things had to go through a tower moment, basically. But like any tower moment, it's so much easier said than done. It's really hard to tap into hope in the midst of what feels hopeless. And so I hope, I guess I just want to remind you to find that center within yourself, to find that inner poder within yourself, and come back to it over and over again, because that's what's going to hold you hopefully down. And of course, there's other things, right? Like I think at a baseline, that's important. And then of course, like community and being good to yourself, to your body, that's something that I have to work on, like my physical health. But yeah, like being mindful of how you're showing up and no tirando la toalla, porque tampoco, we don't need that. Like rest when you need to, regroup when you need to, go into your little turtle shell when you need to, but find the tools and the ways where you can come out, even if it's these cloud glasses and a hoodie, to continue to show up, to continue to take a step forward. Because whether you believe in this or not, some people believe that we chose to be here during these times for a reason, and that we all have a purpose to play, a role to play as we go. And I know that I'm speaking to a group of people with really big hearts. And if you can only show up for your family, then you can only show up for your family, and that's fine. But make sure that you are also showing up for yourself. Don't burn out in the process. Don't let it change your heart, you guys. That's one thing that I really pray or like hope for, que no nos cambie nuestro corazón. Because we're all trying to be cycle breakers, and we're all trying to do things better and not hurt others and heal ourselves for a better future. And I really truly hope that these times don't make our hearts go hard and, put them in a little ice cube y que sean duros, because we've experienced sometimes what that feels like, being the child of someone with that's not emotionally available. So I really hope that these times don't change our hearts, that we are able to withstand these moments, and that we still keep our hope in bringing in that better future. I feel like I have a lot of hope and trust that we will. I shared these tips on TikTok, and I'll share them with you here. One, please, like, if you're finding yourself letting your mind go a million miles per hour and you're not in imminent danger, or you're not going to be directly impacted by ice cream trucks, right? One is to create some sort of task or something where you show yourself that you care about yourself every single day. It can be like looking in the mirror for 5 minutes every day and doing your skincare and being intentional of being present in that moment, or journaling or reading. And it doesn't have to be more than 5-10 minutes if you can't afford that, but do something that you're showing up for yourself every single day. Don't get lost in the craziness of it all. Like, I promise you, grounding is going to help so much. So please do that. That's one tip. The second tip that I had shared was to speak your fears, say it out loud, put it out somewhere outside of your body and your mind and inside of you, like bring it out. Whether, again, it's through journaling or recording a video just for yourself, or a voice note, or a note in your apps. And maybe even the best one is sharing it with someone, because our minds can run a million miles per hour, and thankfully our minds aren't always right and our theories aren't always right. And when we get it out of our system, it really does help. You might get the same fear tomorrow, it might not just disappear, pero if you continuously reach out to community, especially porque I know que nos podemos aguantar un montón. I know we think we can handle so much, and we can, but it's also super helpful when we allow ourselves to ask for help, to reach out, to communicate. So try to learn how to do that. And if you're looking for community, I have the First Gen Healing community, and you are more than welcome there. We're actually shifting the way we work things a little bit. We do 2 meetings a month. The first meeting is going to be like around a certain topic, and the second meeting in the month is just going to be event session. So that's the one we have coming up this Thursday. And I'm looking forward to being in community with fellow First Gens who are in the healing path, on the awakening path, and on top of that are intaking everything that is going on. So if you're looking for community, that's an option for you or the people around you or at work. But try to find community, por favor. Don't try to like tough it out like you typically do. Okay? Okay? You promise? Okay. The third tip, remember, you don't have to be a leader in every single situation. If right now all you can do is overthink, that's all you can do. And then if tomorrow you can share some of that information with your family, then tomorrow you share it. There's going to be a lot of things coming up, and there's going to be different ways in which people will lead the way. So for example, during the evacuation, the first day where it was literally like we were supposed to have a normal night, and instead we ended up evacuating. It all happened so fast that my mom kept saying like, ay, no sé, como que mi mente está, no puedo pensar bien. And so I took the lead. I was like, okay, let's do this. Let's call this. Let's go here. And I started to take the lead on things. And then the next day, my mind was like that, cluttered, frozen. I couldn't move for literally a few hours. I woke up and I was frozen. I couldn't even nada, be on my phone. And I was just sitting there. And my mind was como que no estaba ni trabajando. And so I mention it because like it's that morning where I felt like that. My mom woke up, she made us breakfast in the place that we were staying at, and her mind was working. So trust, pues, que everyone's going to take on a different role, and that you don't have to be the leader in every scenario. And then the last tip. Oh, to be mindful of what you're consuming. Be aware that not everything you hear is actually going to happen. And try to give yourself breaks, porque you're going to fry your own brain and your own nervous system, and you might even throw yourself into like fight or flight without it being necessary in that moment. So try to give your system breaks, porque si no, like you're going to burn yourself out. And I think those were the tips that I shared online. But what I am also going to do is I'm going to link some resources that I have found over these last couple of days that may be helpful for you. I think resources right now, like the more important ones, are like for people that may be at risk for ice cream trucks y eso. So I've found, like, por ejemplo, like what are warrants that you should look out for, which ones are legitimate, which ones aren't, what to do, that kind of stuff. So that's what I'm going to link in the description. But also remember, you guys, there's going to be a lot of people that are scared of leaving their homes. And if you are not someone that has to fear that, like if you are someone that's here, that is a citizen, etc., if you can lend un favorcito como, oh, yo les compro groceries, or if you have the like extra income, like, oh, I'll DoorDash you something. Creativity is going to be so important during these times. Being creative around how you can help, who you can help, like it's going to be so helpful. So I invite you to think about that también. Wow, we have covered a lot today. We've talked about a lot. I hope that this episode was helpful in one way or another. If you're leaving with something, maybe a tip, a perspective shift, a validation of some sort, if you don't mind, I would really appreciate if you comment it somewhere. You can comment on Spotify and YouTube. Apple Podcasts, I think you can only leave reviews, but you can leave it as a review. I want to hear from you. You can DM me on my socials, whatever you feel comfortable with, but let me know. I really want to hear from you, and I would love to know if you think that there's something that I could be doing that could be helpful, topics that we could be touching on in the podcast that could be helpful during these times. I'm thinking nervous system and regulating it, so I'm going to write that down. Actually, I just thought about that. Bringing in someone that can help us, like, through maybe some tapping exercises or ways to calm yourself down during these times. But yeah, let me know, guys. I am happy to adjust accordingly. I created a vision for this year, but again, the lesson that I mentioned earlier, which is like, be willing to drop that and be willing to adjust, and that will also align you to the authenticity, the path that you are authentically meant to follow. And I trust that. So I trust that these moments I will show up as best as I can, and I hope that some of what we talked about today helps you. Pero cuídense mucho. Les mando un huge, huge hug de aquí para allá, donde estén, donde sea que estén. Cuídense, please. Take care of your mental health, your emotional health, your physical health. And I will talk to you, see you, hear you. No, talk to you, I guess, later. Okay, pues. Bye.